G'day everyone, Blake here with another video, and I've been getting a lot of questions lately on my quarantining methods, whether I quarantine at all, and if I do, what process I undergo, and basically what happens when fish arrive here in the fish room. So I figured there's enough interest in it that let's do a video on it. So let's come straight into it and talk about my quarantining methods for new fish. Okay, so when it comes to quarantining fish, a lot of people do it a lot of different ways, so I'm not going to stand here and tell you that my way is the best way, that my way will work for everyone. It's just the way that works for me and the way that I keep my fish. So by all means do more research if you like, but the way that I do it is two different ways. First of all, I keep a lot of species only aquariums, which means that the fish that I receive are going into an isolated tank by themselves with no other fish. So for those cases, I generally do not quarantine because they're not going to be infecting anything else that I already have. They're going into their own aquarium. Then I'll just place them in there and put them under observation. I'll keep a close eye on them for the first month or so to make sure that I'm looking out for things like sunken bellies, ick or white spot, and other different common diseases that you find when fish go through the stresses of a shipping process. Now I'm pretty comfortable with my knowledge of being able to treat things, so if you're new to fish keeping, it might be a good idea to pre-medicate, but generally I don't really recommend that way of fish keeping. I find that it puts the fish under more undue stress than they really need to go under, and especially if you're seeing the fish firsthand and picking them out at a store. So long as you pick up some nice healthy looking fish from the get-go, generally I find that they don't develop too many problems during that 1 month process where they're under heavy observation. So for the vast majority of fish that I bring in here, I don't use any medication or anything. It's just a matter of putting them into an isolated aquarium and keeping an eye on things in case they do develop. Another thing to consider during that process is that you might have some cross-contamination using nets or gravel vacs and things like that. So I am pretty careful on which items go into that aquarium and then other aquariums after that, so that I don't spread anything that might be in the system around the rest of my fish room. Now, if you do have things like nets that need to go in multiple aquariums, including that one, you can keep a bucket aside full of bleach, or some people use potassium permanganate or other chemicals that will sterilize the equipment, killing off any bacteria or other contaminants that might get into the other systems that you keep. So for me, I'm lucky enough that I have multiple nets, so I can keep certain nets aside if I need to get into the tank, but as a general rule of thumb, I like to keep out of the aquariums if I can. Now, if I was going to have a new inhabitant coming in that was going into one of my community tanks, then I would keep them isolated for that same period of a month or so. I'd put them in a separate tank, generally a Kmart tank if they're small fish, or a 2-foot or 60-litre aquarium if they're larger fish, and I find it pretty easy to find a spare tank around the place. Generally speaking, I have spare tanks that I can use. If you don't have any tanks that are available, you can also pick up heavy-duty storage tubs, and so long as you use a cycled sponge filter, it will work perfectly fine as a 1 month quarantining process. And it works especially well if you're going to use chemicals like methylene blue, malachite green, that might stain the silicone or ornaments within the aquarium. I do prefer storage tubs to buckets, even though they might have the same water volume. I find that the surface area along the bottom and the area that the fish are going to use to swim in is a lot more comfortable in that storage tub profile. It's very similar to an aquarium, so it's not like they're going to be swimming around in circles for the month or so. Just like when fish are going into a species only aquarium, I don't pre-medicate or anything like that. Once again, I'm just keeping an eye out in case there's any white spots, which is going to be ick, maybe some fin rot or bacterial infections, fungal infections, or skinny bellies. Probably the thing that I'm looking out for most is the skinny belly, because internal parasites and worms is one of those things that's really kind of difficult to treat. And the common dewormers that are used, like levamisole or praziquantel, they're light sensitive, so you need to black out the aquarium. They also only target certain worms, so you might have to even dose both of those at different times. And I'm really keeping a close eye on things like if the fish are putting on weight or if they're wasting away. if they're improving in color and condition, or that seems to be fading away, and all those sorts of things. Now, if I notice something is wrong and I need some sort of medication, we don't have the access to a lot of the medications that are available in the States, for example, but I do keep these 4 things on hand, as well as aquarium salt, which I find to be a great broad spectrum thing. In case you're not quite sure but you think something's up, then a bit of aquarium salt can certainly go a long way. But outside of that, I use Blue Planet Multi-Cure, which is, again, a nice broad spectrum thing. Great for fungal issues, white spot, velvet, that sort of thing. Next up, very sparingly, I will use this Aquarius Cycline here, which is a broad spectrum antibiotic. Again, if you're really not quite sure what's going on, but the fish are acting up, I will use a bit of this, but it can mess with your cycle. I haven't found it to really knock things about too much, but also I don't want to overuse antibiotics, especially if nothing is wrong with the fish. And then next up, for the sunken bellies, I use these 2 here. First of all, we have Blue Planet Fluke and Tapeworm, which is praziquantel as the active ingredient. And then last but not least, we have Killworm, which is actually a poultry dewormer, but the active ingredient is levamisole hydrochloride, which is again a great dewormer. So both of these do attack different worms, so be mindful of that. I find the levamisole, I usually give it the first go with that, and then if they're still looking a bit skinny, then I'll hit it with the praziquantel. I do have a range of other medications on hand as well, just for specific cases, and you might have seen things like this Superfix here from Fish Care Australia, or this Aussie Fix here from the same company, and a range of other products in the past. I do think it's important to have a range of things and the knowledge to identify those things, but without that knowledge to know specifics around what you're trying to look for, then I would recommend those 5 things for sort of broad applications. That is aquarium salt, levamisole, praziquantel, a broad spectrum antibiotic, and a multi-cure product that contains malachite green and methylene blue. And that should set you up for a great deal of success. And regardless of the amount of experience you have, you should be able to use that combination of things, not all at once, to treat most things. So there you go, guys, that's what I do when I get new fish into the fish room. Really, really simple. There's no need to go overboard and dump 100,000 things into the aquarium, especially if the fish are looking fine. In my opinion, adding unnecessary medications is just going to build up a tolerance in the fish, and when you actually do need to treat something, you might find that it won't be as effective. That's a philosophy that I've used anyway, and it seems to work well for me. So hopefully it works well for you if you choose to go down that path. Other than that, guys, if you have any further questions, feel free to drop them down below and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. Other than that, hopefully the video helped. It always helps me to smash like, hit subscribe and all that fun stuff. And I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.